Hello readers, this is Justin's 52 Books, where I discuss my selections for the 52 Book Club's 2022 Reading Challenge. This is week 14 and I'm talking today about Prompt 27, a book with a map. I'm also talking today about Prompt 26, a book with an author's note. And both of those are applied to the Swords of Lanhkmar, book 5 of the Adventures of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, written by Fritz Leiber and put out, or assembled at least, in 1968, though it comes from earlier works that were written during the 40s and 50s. I've been making my way through the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser books for years, and I was kind of happy when I found that my copy of Swords of Lanhkmar had this map, and when I saw the prompt. Leafing through, I also found that it had an author's note, and when I started reading that at the same time as Shield's Ladder from last week, I realized that both Prompt 26 and 27 applied to both books. And it's interesting, the author's note is much more key to understand at least the book's place in the Swords series than the map. And I'll get to the map in a second. So this is one of the earliest Fafhrd and Grey Mouser stories, though it's book 5 of the series. But it's built on a much shorter work. Essentially, all the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser's Swords books are what are known as fix-ups. Fix-up is a short story or a novella that was made to be sold to the pulps back in the 40s and 50s. And the author's note explains that, and it also explains how Leiber collected all those books and how he arranged them in what's known as the Swords series. The author's note also is where he lays out the idea of where he thinks Fafhrd and Grey Mouser fit into the fantasy writing paradigm. The idea that they're these lovable rogues and how they compare to the works of Tolkien versus Howard versus Burroughs and so on. And in that, he kind of lays the idea, the groundwork for the idea of the lovable rogue, and cements it into what we know today as the Swords and Sorcery brand of books, or types of books. He doesn't claim to create Swords and Sorcery, and he acknowledges that that existed before, but he certainly adds his characters into that paradigm. To be honest, I didn't care for it all that much. First off, is its size. It is the only Swords series book that isn't a collection of much shorter stories, and so there's much more of a slog to get to the high point of the book. Fritz Leiber really shows how good of a short story writer he is when he writes this long. Second, one of the main appeals of all of these Swords books, the Grey Mouser and Fafhrd books, is the interaction between those two characters. The middle half of the book, they're separated, and they're off exploring part of the world, and the other one is exploring the city. And so you don't get that interaction between those two. You don't get that dialogue, and the book is less for that. And talking about them exploring, and this is where we get into the map, hence its inclusion in this challenge. The map isn't used effectively. It's there, and Fafhrd, the character, is traveling through it, but it doesn't offer the same sense of wonder that other books, specifically Tolkien, get when they use a map with their book. Maybe that's just me getting old and I don't care as much. I don't read liner notes from albums anymore either, or lyrics or any of that stuff. So maybe it's me, but I did not get that same sense of wonder from the map. Additionally, I thought, by the name Swords of Lanhkmar, Lanhkmar is the main city in the book, or in the world of that the book inhabits. I thought this was going to be a grand, mysterious exploration of Lanhkmar, a look into its seedy underbelly and all those things. Instead, it is about grain ships and a war with intelligent rats. So that's kind of disappointing. And last, and probably most important, there's a technique that the reader must use to dissociate themselves from the casual racism of the authors of the mid-20th century, particularly fantasy authors, whether it's Robert Howard or J.R.R. Tolkien. And that's known as white supremacy, not in the Nazi sense, but in the nostalgic romanticism of a singular culture, and you have to disassociate yourself from that. The world building that these authors use is all too often seen as the good white culture and the evil other, all too often brown culture. And it's there, and it's there elsewhere in Tolkien and Howard and almost all of it. And if you deny that, you're kind of embarrassing yourself, because it's there, and it's here too. And I don't know how much more patience and understanding I am going to have with disassociating myself from when it comes to works like this. At a certain point, I just don't want to read about the slant-eyed, yellow-skinned Mingle horde anymore. That's M-I-N-G-O-L. I'm glad to have read parts. There's an esoteric weirdness in Leiber's humor that always makes me feel like I'm kind of missing something, but kind of in the best way. It's kind of like a Coen Brothers movie. And the Wizard sponsors, Ningawu, whatever, however you say that, and Shilba make an appearance as well. And I'm always happy to read those two, because it was pictures of those that drew me to these books 30 years ago. And I don't mean to say that this book and these books don't have merit. I wouldn't have gone through 5 of them if they didn't have something to offer. But I doubt I am going to continue with the Sword series after reading this. I may, there's one or two left, but I'm just not very into the idea of reading those at this point. And that's where this book is leaving me. Thanks for watching me talk about my thoughts on Swords of Lanhkmar by Fritz Leiber. This has been week 14 of Justin's 52 books, and I was talking about Prompt 27, a book with a map, as well as Prompt 26, a book with an author's note. For more information on all the prompts of the 52 Book Club, you can check them out at the52bookclub.com. You can also check them out on Facebook and Goodreads. And you can also check me out on Goodreads and Storygraph at Justin's 52 Books. I hope to see you next week with Prompt 6, a book with a household item on the cover. Until then, happy reading. Fafhrd. Ningabu.